At ease, it's your boy Soul Immortal. Man, a few days ago, I was meditating, right? And normally, every single time I'm meditating, I cut my ringers off, I cut all the electronics off, man, so I'm not interrupted. But for some reason, the other day, I didn't, right? So I'm meditating, and I'm out of there, I'm gone, right? And I get a notification on my phone, and it's a guy that was responding to an older video that I made. And the guy was saying, hey, you know what? I like this video, but maybe you can make a video on your journey. Maybe you can make a video on you going from point A to point B. Now, in my mind, that came across as two separate questions, because my journey is one thing, right? And my journey, in my opinion, are the things that I make videos about my experiences, about my family. That's my journey. But when it comes to me going from point A to point B, that's something that I never talk about with no one, because it's in such a sacred place, you know what I mean? I just never talk about it. See, there's a reason why I watch very little television. There's a reason why I have no friends. There's a reason why I don't mess around with social media at all. And the reason is because I'm protecting something. And that something is information. Let's talk about it. So, to answer the brother's question, I first have to take you back to that point in time where I was, man. So I was just coming out of a 10-year marriage. Things were good, but just like 70% of all marriages, it just dwindled down, man, and fizzled away. And I always call this one particular day the day the bottom fell out. And the reason I call it that is because the day that I signed my divorce papers was the exact same day that I got laid off from a job. So in other words, not only did my income go down because, one, I lost a job and I lost that second person that was in the household, but my cost of living went up because now I'm paying child support because I have a son, right? So as you can imagine, life just started dwindling down, man. The little money that I had in savings just went away pretty quick. I'm applying for jobs every day, and due to a quote-unquote bad economy, no one's responding, right? So again, the money's dwindling down, man. Bill collectors are calling. My home is now, I'm getting letters about my home getting ready to be in foreclosure. I'm getting letters about my truck getting repoed. My lights were out, and I'm at the bottom of the bottom. You know what I mean? Like I've said in several other videos, man, I was pawning little stuff that I had in the house just to eat. I remember one night where I had a candy bar and tap water for dinner. So that's how bad it was, right? And during this time, man, toward the last of those days, I remember going into a state of depression. I remember going into a state of having suicidal thoughts. And just one thing on a side note, man, when you hear about people committing suicide, it's not that people are taking the coward way out, man, or people have just completely lost their mind. Now that I've gone through that, I fully understand that it's just people saying, you know what, if this is life, then I just no longer want to play the game. Because up until that point, man, I felt like I was a very giving person, man. I think I was a loving husband. I did a lot of community service, man, feeding the homeless. I love to give. I remember sending my in-laws on a trip to Bahamas. I was just a giving person, in my opinion. And in my mind, I was like, well, why is this happening to me? You know what I'm saying? And I couldn't make sense of it. I served my country. I did all these things I thought for the world. And now here I was at rock bottom and nobody was there. So at that point, I was like, you know what, man? If this is life, I just no longer want to play the game. So that's the state I was in, man. So when I say suicidal thoughts, that was the state I was in. So let me just pause for a second, man, and let you know where I was mentally and spiritually at that time. So I guess beginning about 6 or 7 years prior to that moment, I just become obsessed with the way the mind works, obsessed with spirituality and how it relates to success. You know what I mean? I remember for years, man, I asked myself this question. You know how the Bible says that, that man is over the birds of the air and the fish of the sea and everything that roams the earth and all that stuff. In my mind, I was like, if we're in charge of all of this, when I look at the bird that can fly, I look at the animals that can transition to adapt to certain situations. I look at all these animals. I say, if this is what we're in charge of, then why is my life just getting up, going to work, paying bills, paying taxes, and dying at the end of the day? I'm like, if every other creature has all these abilities, why am I just a common human being? Why am I just a stagnant person? You know what I mean? And I couldn't make sense of it. I was always asking myself that question, right? So going back to where I was in a state of depression, suicidal thoughts, right? So I'd have been sending all these applications out, man, and I was just waiting on a response from someone who would give me a job. And I remember I was getting ready to go to Starbucks. I was on my way to Starbucks one day to look at my computer, man, and see if I'd had any responses. And I'm on the way to Starbucks, and I'm listening to the radio. Now I can't remember if it was like the Steve Harvey show or if it was one of these other radio shows. But there was a guy that they were interviewing on this show, and he was talking about the book As a Man Thinketh. And he was telling about the transition that he made after reading this book and what he was going through in his life. And I could relate to this guy. But not only that, I had this book. I'd had this book for a few years and had never read it. A lot of times I go to the bookstore, and I still do it. I'll just buy 4 or 5 books, and they may sit there for a year or two before I even open them. And this was one of them. So I turned around. I went home, man, and I'm looking through my stuff, and I found this book, As a Man Thinketh. And it's a very thin book. And again, like I say, man, my lights were out, so I just opened my blinds, man, I sit on the floor, and I started reading this book. Now, some very crazy things began to happen. As I began to reading this book, I began to see, it began to bring up all this stuff that I've been studying for the last 6 or 7 years. All these principles, all these things on how the mind works. It just began to stir all this stuff up again, man. And I read this one line in this book, and it changed everything instantly. It says, men do not attract that which they want, but that which they are. And man, the only way I can describe what happened after I read that is to say that the world stopped. That's the only way I can explain it. It was like everything just stopped. Because up to that point, man, the only way I can give it out to you, man, is to say that as if I was baking a cake, right? And all these years, man, I've been studying, meditation, the art of giving, the power of prayer, and several other things, man. And it was like I was baking a cake without all the ingredients. It was like I had the eggs, the salt, the butter, and whatnot. But this what I read, man, it was almost like adding flour to the whole mix, man. It was like I finally had that one ingredient that I needed that brought everything else that I've been studying. It brought it all together, man. I just needed the ingredients. So for the next 24, 48 hours, I was just in a state of transitioning, right? Like all I could do after reading this book was to look at not only my current situation, but situations that I'd gone through, man, for the last 10 or 15 years, man. I just saw my entire life, and I saw that I was the one quarterbacking the whole situation. The good, the bad. I was fully aware that it was me that was making all this stuff happen. You know what I mean? People always talk about being woke. Somebody is woke, or they're enlightened, they're woke. Being woke ain't nothing, guys. Being woke is just being able to look at the world as it is and say, you know what? I see the world for what it really is. That's being woke. But that's doing nothing for you. What I was doing over these next 24, 48 hours, I was going from a stage of being woke to coming into power. Like I said, being woke is just being able to see it for what it is. Having power is the ability to manipulate it. You know what I'm saying? To make it do what you want it to do. That's the difference. So at this point is when I realized what our ability as human beings were, right? And the thing is, we have the ability to transcend just by being. That's why we're called human beings, focusing on the word be. You know what I'm saying? In other words, if there's something that we want, we have to first be it. Prime example, right? Prime example. I have a young nephew, man. Young nephew. And when I talk about focused, man, this guy is light years ahead of where most young adults his age is. Anyway, long story short. So my young nephew, man, his whole life, man, he's just been a very thin guy. I mean, he's probably he's been about the size of my pinky. His whole life, just a thin guy. You know what I mean? And one day I noticed him just talking about, working out and lifting. And in my mind, I'm thinking, good nephew, man, that's good. Get in shape, man. Do good things, as far as fitness. But then I started noticing something, man, over the next few weeks when I was seeing him. He was still this same little skinny guy, man. But he walked a little different, man. Little, he didn't have a chest, man, but he had a little chest out. His conversation became that of proteins and nutrients, and he would talk about micros and macros and all this stuff, man, and deadlifts, man, and he was doing all this stuff. And that's when I said, he's got it. I said, he's figured it out. I said, now all he has to do is wait on it. Because even though my nephew was still this little 100-pound guy, in his mind, he was there. In other words, in order to get big, you have to be big. And after that, it was history, man. My nephew it seemed like overnight, man, he just exploded, man. Now he's doing all this fitness stuff. He's training. He's looking for a long career in health and fitness, man. And it all started with him just changing his mind. See, he had to be that before it even came, man. That's what we are. We're human beings. And that's the way the world works. If there's any situation you wanna be in, or that you won't rather, you have to first be in it. So what did I do after this 48-hour period of realizing all this stuff? I transcended. And this goes back to the question that the brother asked. He asked to talk about going from point A to point B. That there was no journey going from point A to point B. It was instant. It was a decision. I just woke up one morning and said, you know what? I am no longer that person who I was. In my mind, this is who I am now. And I'm telling you, instantly, I went from point A to point B. Instantly. I was a new person. And I can tell you this, man. All the obstacles that I had ahead of me, man, like I said, man, I had my home getting ready to be foreclosed, vehicles reposed, lights were off. It was I could see everything as an illusion in the world, man. It was just a imaginary boundary to me, man. Like I went through all these weeks and months, man, of just dwindling down. Credit score was tainted. I believe my credit score was like a 500 or something. It was low. But something in me was telling me that this was not real. And you hear me say this all the time. Degrees, credit scores, all these, rules and regulations that the world has put in place is not real, man. It's not real. It's to limit the person that's unaware. That's all it is. Long story short, going back to my situation, like I said, my credit score was just over 500, I believe. Let me tell you what I did. Instantly changed my situation. The very next day, I went up to, over the course of a couple of days, I had this idea that I wanted to start my own company, a trucking company. I had a friend that was in the business, man. I talked to him one day. He gave me all the ins and outs. And something inside me said, you know what? This is what I am. This is what I'm doing. This is who I became. I became a business owner. The next day I went up to a trucking company. I went up to a Volvo dealership and purchased me a truck. Now, in my mind, I knew what my credit score was, but something in me was saying, this stuff doesn't exist in the world you're in now. Went and bought me a brand new truck. And just to show you the way the world works, the way the universe works. I was at this restaurant, man. The girl I was dating at the time, we went to this restaurant downtown Longview, Texas. A restaurant that I had never been to, that I would never choose to go to, and I'm sure I'll never go again. And she wanted to go to this restaurant. I'm like, all right, cool, let's go. Went there and ate. And I ran into a guy that I hadn't seen since 8th grade, a guy named Thomas. And this is all within days of this, And Thomas owned a trucking company. Thomas owned a company that sold trucks and trailers. Long story short, I got to hook up on a trailer, man. So all this stuff was just coming together. And within weeks, I had my own trucking company. I had my own authority. I had my own business. I remember my mom and my stepdad at the time. They owned a sign company, and they helped me get everything, get my logos and get my everything lined out, man. And I was on the road and I was making money. You know what I mean? Just instantly, life had changed. Like I said, my home was in foreclosure. Now I no longer wanted to live in Tyler, Texas. So in my mind, I became a person that had just sold a home. And not only did I sell my home, man, there was a guy that came through with cash money. He went to my realtor with straight cash and bought the home, man. And I ended up closing in a matter of days, and I was out of that situation. So life had just turned around, man, just because I had become what I wanted to become, man. Again, I say, man, it's not about being woke. It's about coming to power. And coming to power is just your ability to manipulate the world to do what you want it to do. See, what I realized, man, is that every single thing in this universe that we live in is subject to cause and effect. See, all the videos that I've been showing you here recently, those are the effect. You know what I'm saying? In other words, a lot of these videos, when I'm talking about the vacations and the women that I've met, or the financial advice someone's given me, that's the cake. That's me showing you the cake. But what I'm showing you now is the recipe. You know what I'm saying? For example, and I go through them individually just to show you what I'm talking about. The vacations, like you see me in Dubai, you see me, on beaches, you see me in Egypt and all that stuff. See, those places have been on my vision board for years. These have always been places that I wanted to go forever. But I came to a point in life when, as I matured in my spirituality, they became places that I was. Instead of me wanting to go there, I was there in my mind. And those things were just drawn to me. And I know that may sound crazy, guy, but that's just the way the world works. I talk about the guy who gave me financial advice, right? The guy that he's pretty much my mentor now. Now, I've known this guy since I was about 6 years old. He was a deacon at the church that my father pastored when I was young. So he's been knowing me my whole life. And up until about 3 years ago, me and this guy may have said 500 words to each other over the course of all those years. But once I got in the mindset where I was looking for more, man, I was reading books, I was wanting more, and in my mind, I became financially free. I was still living paycheck to paycheck, but in my mind, I said, you know what? I am financially free, and that stuff began to come to me. So I was at a funeral. I was at my aunt's funeral the first time I started talking to this guy. And the guy just came up to me, man, and just started spitting game, just started talking all this knowledge, telling me how I should move. Now, this man had been in my life for years, but never had this kind of conversation with me. And in my mind, I know that the only reason that changed is because I changed. Once my state of being changed, the world around me changed. Resources came to me, explaining to me what I needed to do. Now, if you watch that video where I talked about the virtuous woman, and I talked about the young lady that I met. If you notice, you'll hear me say that when me and her met, it was a very crazy situation. Let me tell you how I met this young lady, man. So I was in my mom's house in Kilgore, Texas, and I don't know what was going on, but I was there alone. So all I was doing all day, man, was making coffee and just meditating, just relaxing, man, out there in the country, just relaxing. And at the time I was on Instagram, and I'm scrolling through Instagram, man, and I see this young lady. And I'm like, dang, you know, like, she's cute, you know. And I click on her page, and I'm kind of just looking at her. You know, I'm looking at the way she dresses. I'm looking at the kind of pictures she's posting. I'm looking at how she interacts with her family. I'm looking at the quotes she's posting, and I can get a feel on who this young lady is, right? And I'm like, you know what, man? Like she seems like a rare young lady. So I kind of do a little digging around or trolling, whatever you want to call it, right? Just to kind of figure out where this woman was from. And I couldn't pinpoint it, but I could kind of tell she was from the West Coast. There was a lot of talk about California. So I knew she was from California. So in my mind, I said, you know what, man, she's a nice young lady. So I put my phone down, done with it, and I was meditating all that day, man. And I remember saying to myself, I want a young lady just like that. I said, you know, if I'm going to have a woman in my life, I want one just like that. Now, in no way, shape, form, or fashion was I trying to holler at this woman. Did I even think to even approach this woman or get with her or nothing? You know, once I put that phone down, this woman was the last thing on my mind. But when I was meditating, you know, and I'll tell you exactly what I was meditating, man. I saw myself in my apartment, and I saw me and this woman that I saw on IG. I saw her, me and her. We were just sitting there drinking coffee, man, just chopping it up, laughing, having conversation. And I meditated on that just throughout the whole day. Long story short, 2 days later, me and this young lady was FaceTiming. 3 weeks later, this young lady had flew to Dallas. We chopping it up. 2.5 months, 3 months later, this young lady had moved to Dallas from California. And when I say it, you know, like people would ask me how me and her met, and they're just like, wow, like y'all met like that? And in my mind, it's not shocking because I know how the world works. That's just how the world works, man. I fully understand that now. You know, and to bring this back to MGTOW and women, just for a sec. You know, a lot of people take stabs at the brother Derrick Jackson, because Derrick Jackson, in my opinion, he's always pandering. He's always talking about, you know, women hung the moon and women do this and there are no bad women pretty much and blah, 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 blah. And everybody's like, man, that's the ultimate BS. But to be honest, it's not. Not in his world. In his world, what he's explaining is exactly what he's seen, because that's what he's created. When I say that in my opinion, 95% of women aren't worth dealing with, and 5% down to 1% of women are only worth talking to, that's my reality. That's not a lie. That's my reality. That's the world that I've created for myself. When you hear the brother saying, you know what, all women are like that, don't talk to none of them, blah, 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 don't touch them, blah, blah, that's his truth. In his world, that's his reality. So in all actuality, all three scenarios are correct. That's why you can't look at somebody else's scenario or somebody else's point of view and accept it as your own. That's why I limit what I'm exposed to, because this information that I have, I don't want anybody or anything to taint it. I keep it guarded from all things, guys. You know, people always say that you are a product of your environment. And in my opinion, that is one of the truest things ever spoken. But what people are doing is they're trying to control, or they're trying to force an outcome, when what they really should be doing is just changing the environment. If nothing else, the mental environment, to get the desired outcome that you want, man. You know, it all comes down it all comes down to what you've been taught or what you believe, man. Like in the Bible, it says, unless you become as little children, and I'm paraphrasing, it says, unless you become as little children, you should not see the kingdom of heaven. And see, this is, in my opinion, what that's saying is that at some point in your life, you're going to have to hit a mental reset button and realize that everything you've been taught from day one is pretty much garbage. It's saying that unless you become, have the mind of a child again, in other words, meaning unless you're ready to learn everything over again, you're not going to see the kingdom of heaven. And see, I've said it a million times. I've said it in 1 or 2 videos. The kingdom of heaven is not some place that you go when you die. The kingdom of heaven is a mindset. And that's what gets me with a lot of preachers teaching that. That's like this, right? That's like, say you go buy a brand new car, right? Say you go buy, let's say, a Jeep Cherokee, right? Brand new, off the lot. And you get in the car and you driving home, and you get home and you can look in the glove compartment and there's an owner's manual for a Chevy Silverado. And you looking in it and it's like, well, what do I do with this? And you call the dealership and you explain the situation, and they say, oh, no, don't worry about that. You need that book for the next vehicle you get. You would be like, what are you talking about? Like, why would I want that when I'm in the it wouldn't make any sense. And that's what preachers are doing. Preachers are sitting there making everything in the Bible about the next life when really it's talking about this life. Why would some form of spirituality, whether you want to call it God, the Most High, Allah, Buddha, whoever, why would any form of superiority give us a book on the next life when we're in this life right now? A lot of this stuff in this Bible that you read is being translated incorrectly to you, and that's one of them. And that's one of the main reasons I stopped going to church, right? And and for a while I think I put the Bible down. Like, I didn't read it for I want to say a year and a half, maybe even 2 years, because it no longer serves me here on this planet. I was being taught that everything is afterlife. Everything is afterlife. For example, this one particular verse, John 14:2. It says, "In my Father's house are many mansions. If it were not so, I would have told you. I go to prepare a place for you. And if I go and prepare a place for you, I will come again and receive you unto myself, that where I am, there ye shall be also." Now, what the normal, uninformed pastor is going to tell you is that you should read this and you should pour your heart into the Messiah or Jesus, and Jesus is going to go to heaven and make sure your name is in the book of the Lamb or whatever he wants to call it. So that's where your faith should be. You should know that Jesus is putting your name on the good book and you good to go. That's what they teach. That is not what they're saying. This verse is telling you how to live in this world. Everything I've been talking about, this is what it's talking about. See, you've heard me talk about, and the guy, excuse me, because I'm trying to cram about 19 years of stuff I've studied into one video, and it's impossible. But I've talked about Christ, and I've talked about the other me, and I've talked about the Trinity and how it relates to us. This is the complete breakdown of it. This is telling you how to manipulate this world in any way you want to. It's talking about the relation. What this is talking about is the relationship between you, God, and your higher self, which is the Christ. Christ is your higher self. And what it's saying, it's talking about meditation, and it's talking about manifestation. And what, pretty much in a nutshell, I'm trying to cram it. When you're in this state of meditation, that's your state of creation, and that's what it's saying. I go to prepare a place for you, and if I go and prepare a place for you, I will come again and receive you unto myself. What that's saying is, in order to create, in order to be, you have to go somewhere first. If I want to be the president of the United States, I have to first be the president of the United States. I have to send my subconscious, I have to send my perfected self, my Christ self forward. And in my mind, I have to become that. And it says, and if I go forward, I will bring this place back to you, or whatever it said. That's what it's talking about. This is talking about creation right here. That's all it is. And again, man, several people that are in these pulpits, they aren't telling you this because they can't tell you about the kingdom of heaven if they don't, one, know what it is, and two, if they've never been there. They can only assume it's some outer space up in the sky place, and it's not. The kingdom of heaven is a state of mind. For example, when they tell you to pray without ceasing, does anybody even think about praying without ceasing? Because in the physical mind, you think about, going to a church or mosque or whatever and praying and never stopping. It's not talking about physical prayer. It's talking about states of being. Back when I went through this transition, I went to church, I went to prayer, and I never left. I never left that state of mind. That's how you pray without ever stopping. You get in that state and you refuse to leave it. Again, that's why I'm so protected about talking about certain things, because it's sacred to me. So to answer the brother's question about my journey, yes, man, I love talking about my journey, and I think that I talk about my journey by posting videos about different experiences, man. But when it comes to me getting from point A to point B, again, this was instantaneously, man. There was no journey. It was just a matter of me hitting a switch in my mind. It was a matter of me making a decision on who I was going to become, or who I was, and moving forward in that direction. Again, man, in my previous videos, what I've been doing, I've been showing you the cake. But now what I'm trying to convey in this video, man, I'm trying to show you the recipe on how to make this cake. You might not like the same types of cakes that I like. You might not like to travel. You might not like, the certain things that I'm into. So I'm trying to give you the recipe to create whatever world you like, man. There's a saying that says, give a man a fish, feed him for a day. Teach a man to fish, feed him for a lifetime. See, I don't want to show you the places I've gone, man, or the things that I do. I want to show you how to fish, guys. I want to show you how to create the world that you want to create. Ultimately, I want to show you how to go from a state of just being woke, and observing the world as it is, to showing you how to manipulate this world, man. Because like I say, man, this world is not real, and I'm not gonna go down that lane right now. They're talking about a whole nother hour of talking, but these are videos we're gonna get to. You know what I mean? So I hope this made sense. I hope this video made sense. We're starting a series called The Recipe. This is episode 1. Like I told the supporters on Patreon, this first episode would be on YouTube, and after this, all the other episodes will be on Patreon, man, talking about the recipe. So if this is something that you're interested in, again, you can find it on Patreon. Am I telling you to subscribe to Patreon? No, because for one, this isn't for everybody. This information that we're getting ready to start talking about is only for a small number of people. I put a video on Patreon the other day, and a guy hit me up, and he was like, it's weird, man, because I was meditating and I was thinking about certain things, and when I got on YouTube, man, I saw your videos, I had subscribed to you, I know you was, and you were talking about this, and this. He said, I knew I was supposed to be, supporting this show. I knew I was supposed to be listening to what you were saying, man. So no, everyone's not supposed to subscribe to Patreon. Matter of fact, if you're not in a mindset of growth and thinking outside the box, I suggest that you don't, because we're about to get into some heavy stuff, man. Again, this is stuff, man. I got books, man, that I've been reading for, I want to say about 18, 19 years, man. And again, I want to teach you brothers how to fish, man. It's your boy Soul Immortal, and I'm out.